to share any of your thoughts throughout the webinar, and that there will be a Q&A and at the end for questions. But with no further ado, we can get started with the second webinar of the e-scooter and bike share urban usage focus group that seeks to share the findings that emerged through this focus group and that are reflected in the report that was developed. Just to give a little bit of an understanding of what we're gonna of the agenda today. First, I will be giving an overview of the Smart Cities Marketplace project, which is the project under which this focus group exists. And then I'll hand the floor to Eric, who's representing micromobility for Europe and DOT, who will present a presentation on the future of micromobility in Europe. And finally, we'll give the floor to Dora, who's the focus group chair and also part of the Hungarian Innovation Agency, who will share the key insights that emerged from the focus group. And then, as I mentioned previously, we'll have a Q&A. So very briefly, what is Smart Cities Marketplace? It is a project funded by the European Commission, which seeks to bring about sustainability in European cities through the topics of mobility, the built environment, and energy. And how do we do that? Well, we do that with a series of focus groups, such as this one, and discussion groups. We also have a series of solution booklets that serve as guidance for cities. We hold one-to-one technical assistances with cities to help them sort of address specific challenges and provide them with feedback in a very tailored way. And we also lead matchmaking events between cities and investors to sort of obtain funding. Then more specifically, just diving a little bit into this focus group series, the idea behind these focus groups is to bring together a series of varied stakeholders related to a certain urban topic, in this case, micromobility, which are stakeholders that may at times have conflicting opinions or different stances. And the idea is to create an environment of discussion and collaborative sort of decision making and problem solving to try to bring about solutions that suit the ecosystem as a whole. And I'm sure Dora will explain this in more detail later on. But basically, the focus group run through the length of 1 year, where we would meet up on a monthly basis and focus on different thematics related to micromobility. That is just a nutshell of Smart Cities Marketplace. If you have any questions about it, feel free to ask later on. But I will now hand the floor to Eric, who has very kindly offered to present his presentation today on the future of micromobility in Europe. So please go ahead, Eric.
Thank you, Blanca. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. As Blanca mentioned, my name is Eric Jewell. I'm the Manager of Central Policy and Sustainability at DOT, which is the largest European shared micromobility operator. And I'm here today representing Micromobility for Europe, the industry association, in order to share a bit about the industry perspective on shared micromobility, where we've come from, where we're headed. So if you head to the next slide. Just to give first a bit of an introduction to Micromobility for Europe, who are we? We're a coalition of the 4 largest shared micromobility operators in Europe, so Bolt, Dot, Lime, and Voi. We were founded in 2021 to bring the industry voice to discussions around shared micromobility regulations. So we foster dialogues between regulators both at the local level and the EU level, and try to bring about more evidence-based regulations on the mode. And we're members of the European Commission Expert Group on Urban Mobility, and we were happy to be members of this focus group on shared bike and scooters in Europe. So we're very happy to see the results of this focus group be published today. So when we talk about micromobility, I think it's important first to make clear the distinction between what we mean when we say private micromobility and what we mean when we say shared micromobility. So the key distinction here is that as shared micromobility operators, we do not sell vehicles to end users. While our users are using our vehicles, we maintain ownership at all times. And that creates some key differences when it comes to safety and control of the service. So our shared e-scooters and e-bikes undergo regular maintenance by our mechanics teams, which means they're often kept at very high quality standards. They're subject to speed caps that cannot be overridden. So in many cities, there's a certain speed limit of how fast micromobility vehicles are allowed to go. Our vehicles have that speed limit built in, so no one can go faster than that speed limit, whereas private vehicles can oftentimes be modified to exceed manufactured speed limits. And lastly, our vehicles are subject to geofencing, which means through GPS technology, we can control where and when our vehicles can and cannot be used, where they can and cannot be parked, etc., which allows us to keep all of these things together, means that shared micromobility vehicles are much more controlled, a lot safer, and oftentimes higher quality than private vehicles. So looking at shared micromobility in Europe, this is an industry that has come a long way. I think some of you may remember the early days of this industry were admittedly chaotic. A lot of operators appeared almost overnight, deploying thousands of vehicles on the street, and cities did not have the infrastructure or the regulations in place to deal with it. Things have come a long, long way since then. We've seen cities really invest in dedicated infrastructure to incorporate these modes, have recognized the benefits that they bring, while also implementing regulations. A lot of cities now have tendering processes to reduce the number of operators and the number of vehicles. And all of this together has resulted in a service that works well for users while also being well integrated and safe for the rest of the city as well. And we see in 2025 that Micromobility for Europe members facilitated over 500 million rides on shared e-scooters and e-bikes, which is a really phenomenal number. This shows that this is not just a niche mode used by a few people wanting to have fun, but really a core part of the urban transport networks in cities across Europe. Data from operators also shows that around 50% of these rides connect directly with public transport. So a key benefit of these modes is that we're filling first and last mile gaps, not just getting more people onto lighter transport modes, but onto more sustainable modes in general. So both public transport, bikes, scooters, etc. So looking at some of the continual challenges that still exist when it comes to shared micromobility, the first one is, of course, safety, especially the perception versus reality when it comes to safety. E-scooters especially still have a very negative perception when it comes to safety. We, as Micromobility for Europe, have been aggregating incident data from across the shared micromobility operators since 2022 in order to have an empirical evidence base to inform discussions when it comes to safety. And we found that when it comes to shared micromobility, the injury rate on shared e-scooters has dropped by around 20% since 2021. So we can see that over time, this mode is becoming a lot safer thanks to investments in better e-scooter vehicles, as well as investments from cities into safer infrastructure. And so we see that this mode is getting a lot safer, but there's still continued challenges when it comes to the perception of how safe it is. A lot of that negative perception also comes from a continued lack of infrastructure for non-motorized traffic. So as I mentioned, we've seen a dramatic change in our cities over the past few years, investing in a lot more cycling infrastructure, but there's still a lot of progress left to go. A lot of cities still lack a lot of dedicated cycling infrastructure, which can be a challenge when it comes to using bikes and scooters safely. And we see that there's still a lack of dedicated parking infrastructure in a lot of cities, which leads to issues when it comes to trying to park these modes properly. And related to this, the final challenge is public space management, because these modes use public space in our cities. But as we know, the European cities have very limited public space available. So it can sometimes create conflicts. Unfortunately, today, a lot of the public space in our cities is still dedicated to cars. So a lot of the challenge that we face is transitioning some of that space to more sustainable modes so that shared micromobility can be better integrated and better parked and incorporated into our public spaces. Looking to the future, we as the industry are very optimistic about shared micromobility. Having delivered 500 million rides last year, it's clear that shared micromobility is here to stay. It's a mode that is heavily relied on by users in cities across Europe. It's helping the EU and its cities make mobility more democratic, affordable, and clean. So there's clear benefits that this mode is bringing. And we're excited to continue working with officials both at the local level and the European level to try and maximize these benefits while also tackling some of the ongoing challenges. And we're very excited to see the publication of the report from this focus group because we think it will help inform a lot of those discussions and create better regulations moving forward. So that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have in the Q&A later. But I think now I'll hand it over to Dora to talk more about the focus group itself. Thank you.
Just perhaps before we jump onto Dora, there was a question in the chat, Eric, that asks, which source did you use for the overall numbers of micromobility vehicles? And if they were reported by the 4 members of the subject group. So maybe we can just quickly answer that and then we can jump onto Dora.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, it was reported by the 4 members of the group. So as I mentioned, we report all of our incident data. We also report the number of trips that we've had on each mode every year so that we can aggregate these numbers and create a clear picture of the state of the industry every year.
Great. Now, Dora, the floor is all yours.
Well, thank you so much. So good morning, everyone. As Blanca already mentioned, my name is Dora, and I am a PhD student at the Budapest University, which is a technical university, and I am doing my PhD right now. This is my last year, so I am a fan of this micromobility topic. My main research area is the special customer needs or consumer needs in the micromobility market. So that's why I was the chair of this group, and we realized that qualitative research method like focus group is really good for if you would like to research emergent technologies like e-scooters or shared e-scooters and bike sharing system. As Blanca already mentioned, the format was the monthly sessions, and we connected via Teams, and these sessions were almost 1 or sometimes 1.5 hour. We tried to find the main stakeholders of the micromobility market. So we worked with local authorities, private service providers, regional organizations, and civil society representatives, and also some researchers were in the group. And the main goal was to support the integration of shared services into the urban mobility system, and that's why we made this report. So we hope it will be helpful for municipalities and cities to make better and human-friendly regulations. Then, so at our first session, we talked about the definition, and it was really interesting to see how different stakeholders try to define micromobility. But at the end, we agreed that this is real broad definition. So micromobility is a kind of umbrella term. And if we would like to make a better regulation, we have to separate this definition into two main sections. So one is the bike, and the other one is scooter. And next slide, please. And because the bikes already have their regulations and their legal framework and their definition, this is not the main problematic part of micromobility. However, e-scooters are a new type of vehicles, and shared e-scooter systems are new type of services. So that's why cities have to focus to regulate these vehicles and devices. However, we mentioned here two main things or two main problems. One is the over-regulation. So municipalities should have to avoid to over-regulate e-scooters. It means that if something bad happens, so for example, there were fire because of an e-scooter in the Madrid metro tube, and after that, the municipality or the city council decided to ban e-scooters into the public service, public transport system. This is a type of over-regulation, and this is not good for the service providers, and also not good for the whole society, because e-scooters and shared e-scooters are a good type of travel or a good mode of travel. However, when a city is under regulate these devices, is also it occurs problem, because if the users don't have regulations and not use the vehicles safety, this can be more problematic. Next slide, please. So when we are talking about regulations and e-scooters, we should have to focus on sustainability. So I didn't mention that, but when we are talking about regulations, there are two types of countries. The first one, whom are not on the basic stage of integration. They have rules right now, and they are already define what e-scooter means. Right now, they are focusing more on sustainability goals and human-centered mobility approach. However, countries which are at the basic level of integration, right now they are trying to categorize these new type of vehicles and focus more on operative things. However, if we are talking about sustainability, we have to mention two things here, two problematic things. The first one is the battery. So what will happen, the batteries after the life cycle will end, who can help us to make these batteries a bit more sustainable. And the other thing is the substitution effect. So if the e-scooter substitute or replace an active travel mode, this is not good for the environment, and also not good for the society. Next slide, please. Because even if we are talking about society at all, or public health at all, we try to mention here that there are problems in our society. I mean, we all know that obesity and heart disease are very common right now, and if e-scooters are replace active travel modes, these type of disease can occurs more problem. And of course, this is not really good for the environment, because if these services substitute, as I mentioned, active travel modes, the zero emission thought won't be. I mean, it can't happen. So e-scooters should have to replace cars. Next slide, please. The other, I mean, the third main topic was safety. And when we are talking about safety, we can mention three main approach. The first one is the infrastructure. The second is the design of the vehicles, and the third one is the technology and the application user interface. You can see here, I mean, in this slide, that the most common road risks are have a strong connection to poor road surface quality and lack of dedicated safe lanes, or conflicts with cars and larger vehicles. So we agreed that infrastructure is one of the main problematic thing. And if we would like to find out how we can help to be more safe, then we should have to design a new infrastructure, and we should have to give the permission to the police and the other governmental institutes to have the enforcement. I mean, give them the right to enforce the rules. Next slide, please. As I already mentioned, and Eric already mentioned, the overall, we agreed that the overall volume of traffic is the elephant in the room. So the main problem of cities is the car-centric design and public space management, because many public space is used by cars right now, and we have limited space. We have limited, not just limited public space, but limited road space, road weight, and that's why cities should have to focus creative solutions, and that this is not easy for them. Next slide, please. However, when we are talking about users and safety, the third thing, as I mentioned, was technology. And right now, there are many features in the application. So maybe real-time vehicle availability, visible battery levels, and there are so many safety-related prompts. But these features have connection with the users. But if we would like to improve the service quality and the safety vision, cities have to collaborate more with service providers, because they have the data. They can help the municipalities, they can help cities to design data-driven regulation. So this is really important, and we as a focus group agreed that this can be one of the main pathway for the future. Next slide, please. However, not just technology is changing, but the user profiles are also evolving. So maybe you can go back to the early 20s, I mean 2020s, when e-scooter users were more like male and middle-aged and high income people, and the motivations were kind of leisure activities and being with friends and feeling the fresh air and so on. However, right now, more women started to use these services, and of course the motivations are already changed, because not just they are using e-scooters not just for fun but for commuting, and cities should have to focus a bit more to help the service providers how they can complete public transport and not cannibalize these type of travel modes. And of course, we agreed that there is no single ideal user for shared services, because an appropriate user is familiar with the basic rules and use the service intended. So this is really important, not just, so the regulation is not just for the providers, but also it's for the users. Next slide, please. And in our last session, we have talked about the future visions and integration. You can see here we mentioned some interesting pathways. Maybe one is banning. So I think most of you heard about what's happening right now in Europe. So Paris started this process at 2023. Then Madrid also banned shared e-scooters in 2024, and right now Brussels decided also to ban shared e-scooters from cities. However, the stakeholders already mentioned that banning shared services won't solve the problem. I mean, won't solve the e-scooter problem, because users will change shared service to a private device, and regulating private devices is more problematic, because the government don't have these type of measurements. I mean, these type of things like geofencing or limit, they can't limit the speed. So it's a bit more problematic. However, we already mentioned active travel and passive mobility. What will happen, the public health and the society if active travel mode, if passive travel mode will replace the active travel modes. But we also mentioned an interesting pathway here, which is regarding the integration with logistics. So cargo, e-bikes, and last mile delivery. In Hungary, there are so many food delivery company whom are using e-scooters and e-bikes, and this is really interesting. And also, we have talked about the micromobility versus the public transport. So how can cities integrate shared services into urban mobility, and how can they put all these services into one system. So it was also really an interesting conversation. And I think that was all from my side, and we are open for questions. And of course, we are really eager. What are your future visions about shared services and e-scooters?
Thank you very much, Dora, and also Eric beforehand for sharing such a sort of variety of very important topics on micromobility as a whole, but e-scooters specifically and bikes specifically as well. I think it has opened sort of a space for a very interesting discussion. And I actually have a couple of questions for you, but before I ask them, perhaps we can cover the ones that were mentioned in the chat. I see, Holger, you made a comment. Perhaps you want to just voice it yourself. If not, I'm happy to read over it.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I'm Holger, living in Frankfurt, working in Frankfurt, and we have a twin city situation across the border between Germany and Poland. On both sides, we have scooter renting systems. On the German side, it's subcontracted by the public transport operator, and on the Polish side, it's free market offer, licensed by the town hall. So, but we have very different regulations on both sides, so that the mobility solution is not to be used across the border. And this is, of course, not a very nice situation, and we want to overcome that. And we would like to get some hints what program or other assistance could be approached to go ahead to overcome this. This means in practice not just different currencies and applications. It means especially if you have to drive on the roadside or you have not to drive on the roadside, if you have to have a helmet or you have not a helmet, if you are 16 and minimum or not, and something like that. So that is really a challenge.
I don't know if Eric or Dora, you would like to respond to that. Feel free.
Yes, absolutely. I can respond first, and then Dora, maybe if you have anything to add. Absolutely, this is a problem that we see a lot, that we're constantly trying to flag to regulators, that oftentimes the regulatory system and licenses that are given to operators don't actually match the functional commute areas that exist in our cities. So it's a problem not just across countries, but also across municipalities sometimes. I live in Paris, for example, and within the city center, we have a network of private bike share operators, but they're not allowed in the peripheral cities. So once you hit the border of the city, your ride has to end, whereas the public bike share system covers the full region. So this is something we're constantly trying to raise, that really the services should match the functional urban area of a city, so that people can complete their full commute on one service. And specifically when it comes to country different regulations, this is something that we're trying to raise at an EU level, to say that at the moment, every EU country has vastly different regulations when it comes to shared e-scooters. And harmonizing these as much as possible not only helps the industry by giving us a more harmonized market to operate in, but also helps riders at the end of the day. For examples like you mentioned, where you want to travel from one across a border within your same city, and you want to be able to complete that on one vehicle instead of having to stop and switch or being confused about differing regulations across. So it's something we're pushing. Unfortunately, it's a matter of waiting until regulators catch up to address the issue.
Well, I have nothing to add because Eric mentioned everything, but this is also problematic here in Hungary, even if we don't have regulations right now for e-scooters. However, we have 23 districts in Budapest, and these districts have rights to manage public space and some operational rules, and the situation is the same. So maybe in the central areas there are speed limits like 10, 15 maximum, but when you go to a peripheral area, you can use the device up to 15. About, I mean, regarding helmet in Hungary, this is not obligatory right now. But yeah, these type of questions are similar, I think, in European cities.
Perhaps we can look at the other comment in the chat from Vera. Vera, I don't know if you want to just voice it yourself as well.
Yeah, happy to. Hi. Hello, everyone. Hi, Eric. Good to see you again. So my question was about something that you mentioned earlier. You said that one of the worries or one of the issues, maybe potential dangers, is that micromobility might divert users from using more active travel modes. My question refers to whether there is any data available on this topic. So do we happen to know if that really is the case, so that basically the user base of motorized micromobility is the user base that we use to address with non-motorized vehicles, or do we maybe target a part of the population that prior rather would use public transport or cars?
Yeah, hi Vera. Good question. I can say first that we know around 25% of our trips replace cars and ride-hailing and taxi trips. So we know that there is a solid amount of positive modal shift away from motorized polluting modes. And that's strongest in peripheral areas where there's often gaps in the public transport system. You often don't have other options. And I think one of the strongest benefits of shared micromobility is the ability to overcome if, for example, you want to take a public transport, but you live too far of a walk from your nearest public transport station. Having shared micromobility means that you can now cover that distance more easily and take a public transport trip that you otherwise may have called a cab or driven for. So that's kind of the strongest benefit. We do see that in inner cities, there is sometimes still cannibalization of walking and of public transport trips. But oftentimes we see that that is a transition from a less efficient form of travel on walking or on public transport. I always use the example of my personal commute. It's about a 30-minute walk, so doable, but in the mornings, I'm not always up early enough to do that walk, or during a heat wave, I'm not really interested in showing up sweaty to work. Or I can take a pretty inefficient metro route that involves changing 2 different lines, or in 10 minutes, I can take a bike and get there straight away. So you can make the argument that yes, it's if taking a bike instead of walking is maybe a less sustainable choice. But I think it's also providing a lot of efficiency benefits at the same time. So I think there is a bit of a trade-off there to consider.
And even considering public transport, I would say that using an electrified micromobility vehicle is still I'm guessing, more sustainable overall, because we kind of take the weight off, let's say, large and resource heavy public transportation systems. But I do not know if there are any explicit numbers about this phenomenon available.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that brings up another good point as well of oftentimes we reduce the strain on public transport systems that, like, if you think about major events, we add to the system of, rather than having to stand on an overly packed metro system that can't handle the amount of people, it provides more resilience to the system. There is a bit of data in terms of the replacement there that differs per operator. It's not something that we standardized. But there is a bit of data there, and also a lot of, I think, research has looked into this as well, and the more academic side, and maybe Dora, you can speak to that.
Yes, thank you. We, as a research group, has already made some survey in Hungary. We have more than 500 participants in that survey, and we asked them which travel mode you substitute with shared services or with e-scooters. And I can't remember the exact numbers, but I can, of course, send you our papers after that. But the main pathway was a bicycle and walking. So these two these two were the main answers. And of course, there are so many academic paper regarding active versus passive travel. They already made surveys, so they have not just qualitative but quantitative data. So that's why I mentioned in my presentation that this is a real problem, and that's why some people ask questions about e-scooters sustainability.
I actually have a question that I thought about whilst you were presenting, that perhaps would be interesting to discuss, because we've mentioned both of you have mentioned this tendency for banning rather than regulating when discussing e-scooters specifically, right? Because there's I think there's a different connotation to e-scooters than there are to e-bikes for all the reasons that you've mentioned. However, as you will have heard, recently Barcelona has also banned private shared bikes from next year onward, under the rhetoric that it's a service that mainly serves tourists rather than locals, because locals will use the public shared bike system. So I was wondering, what are your thoughts regarding that? Because it's sort of a first on the topic of bikes, not on scooters. And what do you think are going to be the implications, I don't know, for the market, but also for micromobility overall? Because if Barcelona gets started with this, I could easily see other cities picking up on this as well, in cities that specifically have a problem with tourism like Barcelona does. So yeah, just wondering what your thoughts were on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Barcelona is a very interesting case, as you mentioned, because, I think we're used to seeing the negative perception of e-scooters, but it's very rare to encounter negative perceptions of e-bikes specifically. And I think Barcelona is an interesting example because globally we see that our services are not actually used that much by tourists. It's predominantly used by commuters in different cities. I think Barcelona is a unique case because their public bike system can only be used by local residents. And so the private shared e-bike system was kind of the only option that tourists had if they wanted to get around the city sustainably while visiting. I think it's quite unfortunate to see the removal of those services. Even if they were used predominantly by tourists, I think it's a good thing to give tourists a sustainable option to get around cities. And I fear that they'll now shift to ride hailing or taxis, which will only cause more congestion on the streets, more pollution in general. So it's something that I hope does not continue. I saw that the mayor announced that they're planning an expansion of the public bike scheme system to account for the shift in demand. But I believe, as far as I know, that it's still not available to tourists. So I think we'll see how it plays out, but it's not something that I necessarily expect in other cities, because I think most cities today have very well functioning bike systems and see the benefits of them. So I think it might be a Barcelona specific case, but we'll see.
So I don't know if you wanted to add anything, or it's just, yeah, it's, go ahead.
No, I don't want to add too much here, because Eric mentioned everything. But yeah, this is, I think, a real problem, that if you ban shared services, it doesn't mean no e-scooters will be in the city. So, and private ones are, I think, more dangerous, because users can operate with speed limits and maximum speeds and so on. So they can modify the vehicle by themselves, and this is really unsafe.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess, sort of, as Eric mentioned, the fact that you ban e-bikes doesn't mean that you're going to address any issues that may emerge from tourism as a whole. It's just going to divert it.
Yeah.
So let's see how that develops. I am very curious, myself as a professional in urban mobility, but also a resident of Barcelona. There's another comment from Maria Hilda in the chat that says that she's very interested in having data from different countries and cities compared. I don't know, Maria Rita, do you want to grow on that comment?
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, my idea is that I think there are not too much data, especially on e-scooters, but even on bike sharing among different countries. And it could be very interesting understanding also why some cities are banning the e-scooters and some others are not, in terms of the profile of users. Maybe there are some differences, and we could understand which cities, if there are common issues in the cities or common profiles in the cities that are banning e-scooters. I've lived in Barcelona like 25 years ago, and I'm currently now 3 days. I came to Codais, which is a bike salon here in Paris, and I realized that also one thing that I wanted to ask is, are there, because in Portugal we don't have any scooters association, and most of the bikes associations don't really want to tackle the issue of scooters. So I feel that the users of scooters and also the scooters industry, they are not kind of represented. So to make some lobby in favor of scooters, I think maybe they need more organization. And I was also going to ask you if you know if there are any scooters associations, either from the industry or from the user side. And if not, are there your associations in your countries taking care of e-scooters so much as e-bikes? So this is a little bit my my questions. I hope you understood. Thanks a lot, and congratulations on the webinar.
Thank you. Yeah, I think in terms of creating more aggregated data to understand the e-scooter industry, it's definitely a challenge. It's something that Micromobility for Europe has been working on. So for instance, we've been aggregating safety data for the past few years to at least have a standardized understanding of safety. In terms of other topics, it's been quite limited in what we've been able to aggregate because it does depend on every operator sharing this data transparently and sharing it in a standardized way, which can oftentimes be difficult. But it's something that is a priority for us that we're trying to work on. And I know there's a few initiatives throughout the industry from different organizations. For instance, there's an initiative being led currently, mostly led by the Shared Micromobility Alliance, which is a group of cities that work together to share best practices on the shared micromobility systems in their cities, to create a sort of index when it comes to shared micromobility, to understand exactly the different how each system performs in different cities, and create a kind of standardized metric to measure that. It's still in the early stages of the project, but I think that is something that could be very promising in the future to create a standardized sort of database to inform a lot of the discussions around shared e-scooters.
Thank you.
Dora, were you going to add anything or not? I feel like I saw you almost clicking your microphone button.
Yes, because regarding data, I already had an interesting interview with the head of unit of Lime, I mean in Hungary, and he mentioned that getting data from the users, it's not easy because right now nobody, I mean, none of the providers asking specific data from the users. And if someone will be the first, then maybe this company will lose users. So it's not an easy step. However, government would like to get data from the operators also. So at this point, the providers should have to decide to get a bit more data from the users. But I think Eric knows this problem a bit better than me.
Yeah, maybe I can speak to that and also answer Vera's question in the chat at the same time. So we do conduct surveys of our riders, and that's our best way to get user-specific information. So Vera, to your question about the 25% of rides replacing cars, it's actually not an industry figure, that's a dot-specific figure, because that's the company that I work for. This is something we haven't been able to standardize across the industry yet, because every operator collects it in a slightly different way. But as Dora mentioned, it's quite difficult for us to collect data within the app itself because of GDPR restrictions. There's a lot of privacy considerations around what data we're able to collect directly from users. So a lot of this information comes from surveys where riders can voluntarily provide this data to us, and then we can have better insights without violating those privacy protections. So that's a bit of the challenge that we go through.
I think we just have a couple of minutes left, and I think one interesting point to close off with is a point that actually someone made in the LinkedIn post that that disseminated this webinar, which I found quite interesting, which is the element of heat and heat waves and its impact on micromobility, which is something that I read and I hadn't really stopped to think about it. And I think it's quite timely for this webinar's period. And I just wonder, what do you guys think in the coming years where heat waves are going to be increasingly happening, and they're posing more and more of a risk in urban contexts? How should micromobility address this, and what type of like concrete things could be done to minimize the risks that a heat wave can have on micromobility users? Because unfortunately, I think we're headed in that direction more and more. So yeah, just wondering if you had any thoughts about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the heat waves, more than anything, have proven the benefit of having shared micromobility services. It's a bit unfortunate that it took this climate situation to arrive here. But I mean, we've seen in the past few weeks during the heat wave just record ridership in every city. And as I kind of mentioned earlier, like as a person living in Paris that was experiencing a record heat wave, my options were taking a non-air conditioned metro that was full of people, or walking in 40-degree heat. So in those conditions, taking a bike where you get a bit of a breeze in your face is one of the best options available. So I think, you know, as this situation continues, and I'm sure we'll have more heat waves in the future, I think it's a reminder that investing in these kinds of modes is incredibly important. And then just the importance of having these options in place to, you know, adapt our cities to the changing climate.
Or I don't know if you want to build on that.
No, I can all agree with you. Yeah, so right now in Hungary, it's up to 40 degrees. So if you would like to use a scooter, it can be a real danger. I mean, you burn out, or I mean your skin will burn, and of course it's really hot in here, so I don't know how can we protect ourselves if we are not using a car or a public transport or something like that.
It's almost the irony of micromobility, right? We needed to sort of address the negative externalities of the climate crisis, but at the same time, being out there
And
on
not
the
just
street.
your skin, but the device is hot. So because
Yeah.
we don't have specific specific space for share these scooters, they are on the road and on the street, and the sun is shining on them, so they are really hot.
Yeah. I see that both Dora and Eric have replied to Vera's comment via chat, which is perfect because we're going to have to wrap it up because it's past 11. But I just wanted to thank all of you for showing up and for the very interesting discussion. And above everything, thank Eric and Dora for your very interesting presentations and contributions. If you would like to add anything else, feel free to do so. But yeah, thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Blanca.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.